Welcome everyone to Buddha's Center. Today we're looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, specifically the section on the teachings shared in common with beings of medium capacity. And we've gone through the text once again, all the way up to this point where we've started to work again with the greatness of the author, the teachings, and how to listen to and explain the instructions, and how to lead students through the actual pathway instructions, and then the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity. And we've gone over them, pretty well once again. And I feel so fortunate to be able to discuss these things with you and really see how this path is so integrated, and how, as we study later things, we kind of have epiphanies about the, earlier things that we thought were kind of more simplistic topics. And I'm finding that these days, delving into a lot of the different oral instructions in relation to the teaching shared in common with beings of small and medium capacity has been so helpful. And to see how, Lama Tsongkhapa and Lord Atisha kind of set this standard, and then all of these different commentaries in the oral tradition sprung up, and not because it was an incomplete instruction, but because everyone has their own personal experience that they can bring to the table that might help someone like me to delve deeper into the path. And, that's what I'm finding these days, that these incredible different texts and commentaries by the Panchen Lamas and the fifth Dalai Lama and the third Dalai Lama, and something we'll look at today by the Gomchen Ngawan Drapa, are just so helpful, and little tidbits that help me to enhance my understanding of what seems like pretty basic material if we're looking at it from the kind of outskirts. We're looking at the Four Noble Truths, we're looking at the truth of suffering kind of from the outskirts, and not really knowing how to taste its essence so much that it would make us day and night want to get out of cyclic existence. And I'm finding that these commentaries are just like ornaments, just beautifying something that was already so beautiful, but at depths that I had no idea would mean so much and have so much to do with bodhicitta. And so I'm just fortunate. I feel, as Geshe-la Tenzin Ladrin says, like the luckiest person in the world to be able to sit here today and be able to discuss something of such significance with you all. And I know that many of you were with Khensa Geshe Wandok for many years and heard this same discussion. And I hope that whenever you hear me talking about the stages of the path to enlightenment, and you always heard Rinpoche through me, it still sounds like Rinpoche in terms of the outline of the stages of the path to enlightenment. And any nuances that I might bring in, or just from my own personal experience, as a Westerner born in 1972, in the Northeast, and how these teachings that, Lama Tsongkhapa, wrote in the 15th century and so forth, are applicable to my mind at this very, very moment in terms of common modern day examples and language that we can all understand without deviating in any way whatsoever from the meaning, the task at hand. And I hope that, this last almost coming up on 2 years, I've been able to share that with you in a complete way. So I was looking at some of the texts this morning and just feeling so blessed to be able to really open, so I have a lot of texts. If you've ever been in our home, there's a dining room table, generally texts spread out all over it. And what I'm finding is so neat these days is to be able to just grab any of them. And if it's a Lam Rim text, you get to the section and exactly kind of what's going on, and how then, some of the texts are written more technically, and then other texts are written more in a practical practice manner. But it's really interesting to be able to look at them and see, these are Lojong teachings, these are teachings of the extensive deeds, this is profound view lineage, and be able to sort it all out, and not for the sake of, trying to become the world's greatest scholar, because that would be impossible for me, based on, what I know of those beings to have done to become the world's greatest scholars, in terms of, from very childhood, not doing anything, but studying these great texts. But from an experiential perspective, because these teachings are so profound and so precise, I've been able to, come to believe through experience in some of the more, coarse stages of the path to enlightenment, in terms of, relationship with my teacher, Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche Genla, my relationship, with death and impermanence and so forth. So all of these topics, life of leisure and opportunity, I really feel in the morning, the first thing, and this is not how I used to wake up in the morning, but in the morning, first thing I do is think about, this basis, and that it should be used for something of essence, something important, and that it isn't going to always be here. So I try to, wake up in the morning, and as soon as I'm up, walk downstairs and make prostrations, to the teacher who's inseparable from the deity, from Aryatara, Khyentse Geshe Wandak, inseparable from Aryatara, and this is only because of repetition, only because of 25 years of learning how important this is, and seeing the benefits of the practice a little tiny bit at a time. So that I stuck around and persevered just enough to kind of slip under, just enough to keep going. And then now I look back on it and just, wow, and this information is just here for all of us for free to discover. And that's the thing about it, is that every one of us has kind of our own pleasant mix of stuff within our minds, and different things appeal to you and me. And that's why Buddhas emanate in different colors, Rinpoche said. I mean, at that coarse of a level, we have that much of kind of different affinities that the Buddhas have to take care to make different colors. Because I one time asked, why is, this one blue and this one green and this one red? And Rinpoche said, some people like blue, some people like green, some people like red. And it made so much sense to me that at the most subtle level, the Buddhas were manifesting in a way that could meet up with a mind. And, I don't like all of those colors, but some of them really, make more sense to me than others. And that doesn't even make sense. It's just a hue. But the Buddhas know these very subtle things and care for us so much that they're willing to do, things like be a different color. Whatever it is that you need, I will be. And this is an amazing kind of aspiration, to be able to be like a being who would think, whatever it is you need me to be, I'll be. And that's the Buddha does that without even having to think about it, just spontaneously, because of thinking about it on the Bodhisattva path. And without truly understanding the nature of suffering, without truly identifying the First Noble Truth. And we'll find in some of the readings today that it's just not possible to really work for the benefit of others. If you don't know all of the potentialities within your mind's experience of the world, your future projections and so forth of suffering, then you won't even be able to relate to someone when they're acting in a way that you can't believe. And then when you study the Lam Rim, you would say, well, of course, someone's got to act like this, because we're like kind of puppets under the control of this kind of devious mastermind, self-cherishing attitude that's been kind of pumped up since beginningless time by self-grasping ignorance. And in that beginningless continuum, I've been many things. Not Jeff, the I has been many things. I've thought of myself as a hell being and believed it, and thought of myself as a hungry ghost and believed it, and thought of myself as a human now that's named Jeff and I believe it. All in dependence upon just mere imputation, in dependence upon a basis. And here, this basis is these mental and physical aggregates here that I'm believing has some sort of connection to my inherent existence. But when I try to find this inherently existent Jeff, I come up short when I look for it within the basis or separate from the basis, just like I would have when I was believing that I was an inherently existent ant, in dependence upon my ant parts in a previous life, and in dependence upon lives like that. Even as an ant, in previous lives, when I am an ant, I created karma through my body, speech, I'm not sure, and mind. And if I could be under the influence of what I did as an ant, ants are really just driven. This is just an example. Think of other things you could have been. And then whatever I did during that time has the potential to ripen into an experience, into a habitual kind of tendency of yelling or frustration, not digging away and not getting where I want to, or something as an ant. I don't know, some sort of frustrated mind that creates a frustrated mind now. Of course, if I didn't have the kind of faculties that I have right now, and I didn't have, the moral principles that we at least are brought up with, even as a child, imagine what I could do. And if whatever I'm doing during that time is planting seeds, just like whatever I'm doing at this time, and now the seeds I'm planting are going to ripen into an experience in the future. And the experiences that I'm having right now are because of seeds that I planted previously when I was maybe a pig, or, a chicken, who knows, just driven by some sort of desire, or a snake, driven by some sort of desire, if we're looking at it from metaphorically, then everything that I'm experiencing that's suffering and that is kind of distasteful in terms of my behavior is because of some sort of way of thinking and being before. And if I start to really believe that, I start to really believe that this ignorance is driving my actions that are planting these seeds, and the seeds that I plant give rise to concordant results, then I'll start to want to act differently than the way that I would normally behave, driven by self-grasping ignorance and a self-cherishing attitude. Because when I stop and stand back and look at what those things bring to me, I'll find out that they bring to me suffering because I engage in non-virtue and dependence upon them, and what those deeds do to me. Those deeds follow close behind, as certain as a shadow. So help me to be careful to stop the slightest wrongs of the many wrong we do, and try to carry out instead each and every good of the many that we may, as Lama Tsongkhapa says, in the foundation of all good qualities. So we start to, because of understanding karma and its results for myself, I start to try to tame my behavior. And because of understanding karma and its results in relation to you, I start to have compassion. This study that we're doing right now of the First Noble Truth is so important. And so many people jump over it and just move on to compassion. And we'll see that that's not really going to produce a full ability to work for beings' needs. And even if you are at a higher scope, if you don't know the small scope, how will you work for beings' needs who are at small scope? You're going to only teach them the high scope. And we know that's not what the Buddha did. So even if you think, just try this on for size, even if you are like in your mind super high scope, but you don't know the teachings of small and medium capacity that well, you are not going to be able to help those of us who aren't such high scope. So then your compassion and your love and your idea to, work for others' benefit is truly not there, because not knowing what all beings' needs are. And if you do this, you may just discover that there was something missing in your own realizations. So today we're talking about Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. We're in the section on the 3 sufferings. We've gone over the 8 sufferings and the 6 sufferings, and now we're in the section on the 3 sufferings. And before we get started, let's do what we always do, and let's bring all the sentient beings here to share this gift of the Dharma with them. Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche was so generous with the Dharma. All he really cared about was seeing some sort of movement forward, evolutions in terms of spiritual progress, in his disciples, in his students. And I saw the patience that he had with me and the repetition that he, he used as a tool to kind of pound into my mind the need to engage in this practice. So just imagine that you start to have the same qualities as beings like Khyentse Geshe Wandak and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and you in your mind have one thing and one thing only to do, and that's to somehow get this truth to every single sentient being in the universe who has suffering or has a incomplete happiness. And you're bringing them here to show them exactly how to get rid of suffering forever and how to have the most complete amount of happiness that's possible. And that you want just that. And like yourself, all sentient beings really just want to be free from suffering and have the most amount of happiness possible. And imagine that you're bringing them here to share with them the secret to making those 2 things happen. Getting free from suffering by removing the afflictive obstructions, and being free from a kind of a capped happiness, being able to achieve the most happiness possible, the most blissful state possible by removing the obstructions to omniscience. So the teaching that we're listening to today has the medicine that's the antidote to the self-grasping ignorance and the self-cherishing attitude at its most kind of coarse and subtle level, and therefore is an instruction that will lead all beings in the same way to the complete state of Buddhahood. And every being, as I said, has a little bit different tendencies and need to hear it in a little bit of a different way. So let's just imagine that these beings are being brought here, hell, hungry, ghost, animal, human, demigods, and gods, and they're able to hear this in their own capacity and transform in dependence upon these instructions. In the language of the gods, nagas, and yaksas, in the language of demons and of humans too, and however many kinds of speech there may be, I shall proclaim the Dharma in the language of all. Laike dan lu dan no jinke drubon da da mi ke nan dan wa kunji janan ji tsamba dan che ke du da ji ju den do. Now you've imagined that all sentient beings are here with you. Now imagine the merit field is beginning to form in the space in front of you and all sentient beings. Imagine that you see Buddha Shakyamuni, beautiful and radiant, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Khyentse Geshe Wandak, Dema Locha Rinpoche, Geshe Lobsang Gompo, Khyentse Lobsang Gyatso, Geshe Dorje Damdula, Umsala Geshe Aga, Charo Rinpoche, Geshe Mala Tenzin Ladrin, Ani Tipton Chodron La, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, all the holy beings, imagining there in the space in front of you, any being that you consider an enlightened being. Now imagine the beings of the extensive deeds lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Maitreya and Asanga, and Dignaga and Dharma Kirti, and Basu Bandhu, and Vimuktasena, and Haribhadra, and Shakyaprabha, and Gunaprabha, Lama Salimpa, and Lord Atisha. Imagine the beings of the profound view lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri, and Buddhapalita, and Nagarjuna, and Chandrakirti, and Shanti Deva, and Buddhapalita, and Chandrashita, and Kamalashila, and again, Lama Salimpa and Lord Atisha, imagining all of these beings, the beings of the lineage of blessings passed down from Vajradhara to Sarahan, Matripa, and Tulo, and Naro, and Lotsawa Marpa, and Jetsun Milarepa, and Gampopa, imagining the Atisha's passing down the Lamrim lineage to Drone Tompa, imagining the 3 old Kadampa lineages, imagining all of the beings of the Nyingma, Padmasambhava, Sakya, Satyakonga Nimpo, and Sakya Pandita, Sakya Randawa, all of these holy beings of the Kaju lineage, the Karmapas, imagining the Galupa lineage, Lama Tsongkhapa, Kirtup J, Joseph J, Basuchuji Jetson, Panchen Sonandrapa, Jayan Sheba, all of the holy Panchen Lamas, imagining the Gomchen, Ngawandrapa, imagining Janja Rupi Dorje, Gonja Jimmy Wampo, the 7th Dalai Lama, all of these holy beings, Purvajo Jitsumpa, all of the holy beings were so connected to the highest Yoga Tantra deities, performance Tantra deities, action Tantra deities, all the 35 Buddhas and all the protector deities. Imagine them here now in the space in front of you, looking upon you and all sentient beings with loving kindness. You're all experiencing this. Imagine everyone's feeling the love of the merit field. Imagine you're feeling the love of the merit field. You've brought them all here to feel love, to feel protection, to be able to meet their material needs, to meet with the Dharma, the only thing that can help. Now, with this in mind, with the visualization of the merit field and the space in front of you and the bodhicitta field, all sentient beings that you've brought here, any sentient being who has among the afflictive obstructions to omniscience, now imagine that you and all sentient beings, in the presence of all the gurus, all of the Buddhas, recite the Heart Sutra. So as we recite this Heart Sutra, think about the meaning, think of the lack of inherent existence of all phenomena. Think of the fact that all phenomena are merely a projection of the mind, merely imputation. We have dependent origination in terms of causes and conditions and wholes and parts, but at the final level, the final dependent origination, the subtle conventional level, is that things are merely designated, mere imputation through a mind, through a thought designation. In dependence upon some sort of collection. I am merely imputed in dependence upon the collection of the aggregates. So we think in terms of this, just mere imputation, nothing from the side of the object, only from the side of the subject, from the object possessor. Yet there is external phenomena. We need to somehow come to terms with both of those reality, that there is externality, but everything's a projection of the mind. Merely designated, merely imputed. Nothing has any kind of truly established nature. Nothing's established by way of its own defining characteristics, its own character. It's not established in this way inherently, intrinsically. It's not found within the object. I'm not found within this object of the aggregates or something outside of the aggregates. All phenomena can't be found to inherently exist within the object, objectively. We see that it's all brought into being through subjectivity. And this is what the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge is trying to get through to us, that things exist, but they exist in a way that we just don't normally think about. And when we start to think about the way we think they exist, and we start to see what the naturally appearing I, the naturally appearing other phenomena are like, we see that they kind of appear to us to have this existence right within the object, inherently there, that's so solid and concrete. But when we try to find this thing that is so solid and concrete in our mind in terms of a label of a flower or of a Jeff, when we look to its parts and dig deeper and deeper and deeper, we don't find an inherently existent thing that we are sure is so concrete within its parts. And when we look for it outside of those parts, we can't find it there either. And we have to come to terms with the fact that it's just merely imputed in dependence upon a collection, and not a collection that is that, not a collection that's needed to be specifically like this or that, just in mere imputation and dependence upon a thought designation. And a bunch of our thought designators agree that thing is called that. So conventionally, it's okay. It exists as that. But there's nothing from the object side that exists independently as the thing we think is that. It's merely consciousness designating it as this or that. So this is what the Heart Sutra is talking about. And it says that the Buddha says that this is our whole problem. We become attached and we become angry. We're ignorant because of this self-grasping ignorance. And if we can get rid of it, and when we get rid of it, if we've somehow come to terms with the fact that cherishing others is more beneficial than ourselves and develop this kind of beautiful mind of bodhicitta, then we can become Buddhas and we can become the most reliable guides in the universe with perfect love and compassion, perfect wisdom, perfect skillful means, etc., perfect power, all of these perfections that we will have as a result of going through Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhi Soha, through the path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of meditation, path of seeing, path of meditation, and path of no more learning. So implicitly, the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge talks about the 5 paths, and then explicitly the topic is this mere imputation. And we have to come to find out what that means. But that does not mean that things don't exist. It just means that they exist through the power of designation, through the power of mere imputation, through a thought designating it as such. And our thoughts all designating that as a chair as such. Conventionally, we concur that is suitable to be labeled as a chair or as a flower or as a Jeff. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. And at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way, seeing the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the Bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the 3 times by means of Prajaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth. Since there is no deception, the Prajaparamita mantra is said in this way. Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhi Soha, the Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound Prajaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son, honorable family, thus it is, O son, honorable family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice when the Blessed One had said this. Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. I prostrate to the gatherings of dakinis in the 3 chakras who abide in the holy yoga of using space. By your powers of clairvoyance and magical emanation, look after practitioners like a mother looks after her child. Aga samara deshandara samara ebe aga samara deshandara. Aga samara deshandara samara ebe de ata on gate gate paragate parasangate buddhi soha. By the truth of the existence of the 3 jewels, may all inner and outer hindrances adversities be overcome. May they become non-existent. May they be pacified. May they be completely pacified. May all negative forces opposed to the Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. May we be separated from all adverse conditions to the Dharma, and may we obtain all circumstances conducive to the Dharma. May there be auspiciousness, happiness, and well-being here, right now. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain. The teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. San ye zhe dan zhe jie zhe nan la, xiang zhe ba de da ni jia zu ji, da gi ju shi ji bei zhe nan ji, zhe la ben jie san ye zhu ba zhu. San ye zhe dan zhe jie zhe nan la, xiang zhe ba de da ni jia zu ji, da gi ju shi ji bei zhe nan ji, zhe la ben jie san ye zhu ba zhu. San ye zhe dan zhe jie zhe nan la, xiang zhu ba de da ni jia zu ji, da ge ju ji ji bei zhe nan ji, zhe la ben jie san ye zhu ba zhu. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. Okay, so all of these things that we're doing on Thursdays and Sundays, and hopefully every days, are trying to get closer to those principles found in Sachen Kongan Nimpo's parting from the four attachments. And this is kind of the mirror of the Dharma. And I was reading a commentary where it was saying that if we have a smudge on our face, we look in a mirror and we see, and we immediately wipe it off. Immediately. And the Dharma is like a mirror that we study. And when we see that our behaviors aren't concordant with what it's saying, we immediately stop them. Just like we would wipe the dirt off of our face when we look in a regular mirror, because it's a blemish, we see the blemish in our mind through looking at the mirror of the Dharma and then try to wipe it off, and we can use that analogy of wiping it off in a lot of ways, trying to, transform our minds into different kinds of minds, but also by engaging in purifications like the four opponent powers that we just went over quite a bit before. When we see in the mirror of the Dharma that we're engaging in negativity, really engage in the power of basis of, going for refuge and generating bodhicitta, and the power of regretting what we've done, and the power of applying some sort of an antidote, some sort of kind of practice, some mantras, reciting sutras, meditating on emptiness, building statues, some sort of opponent to the negativity we've engaged in, to try to put a stamp in our mind of purification, of reversal of that kind of behavior, and then making a commitment that's realistic, that we can keep. So this is, the four opponent powers are such an easy teaching to remember, and something that we can really apply right away when we read, something in the text. Or a lot of times I find, after having been to quite a few teachings over the years with Geshe Lobsang Gompo, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, I'll be thinking in a way that isn't in concordance with the Dharma, or, starting to really boil up in a way. And I'll hear the teachings, and I'll, that we're given, not like a deity or teacher shows up in front of me like Manjushri did to Tsongkhapa. Hopefully one day this will happen. But more, it's just memories, and these imprints in our mind are also, they leave these memories, and these memories, we can sit back and be fond of a day we went to the beach, or when we're engaging in something, if we familiarized ourselves with it enough, it leaves this kind of perpetual memory in there that allows us to kind of transform our behavior more quickly than we normally would if we hadn't been working with this material more and more, as we become more convinced that it's worthwhile. And it's unfortunate that we don't, right from the beginning, find it as worthwhile in terms of the day and night. I think in my case, if I had only, found in, the worthwhileness of it, to the degrees, and that's what I probably said 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that I do now, when I was younger and didn't have pains and, so many, other kinds of issues. And my mind was so much clearer. I remember being in Drepung in 2000 and what my mind could do, and just dance around here and there, not forget anything. I remember being able to memorize a stanza in, like, I don't know, not a lot of tries. And now I remember when Rinpoche was, the last couple of years of his life, trying to just memorize the beginning of the Abhisama Amkara. I wanted to like show off. And I said, one day I just told myself I was going to do it. And I said that I was going to do it many, many years before, but I'm like, Rinpoche's here now, and I'm really going to show this off. And boy, oh boy, it's considered a hard one to memorize because it doesn't go da, 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 it doesn't, it's at the beginning of the blaze. We do it. If you look at the Tibetan, you'll see what I mean. The hearers. Anyway, it's not as rhythmic as some of the others. It's very hard to memorize. And I just found myself struggling so hard. And to this day, I've not been able to really, really pull it off. Whereas things that were harder are just as hard to memorize. When I was 20, or I don't know how old I was in 2000, how old ever, 25, it wouldn't have been like that, because the beginnings of the logic, like the collected topics texts, there's always like a paragraph or so you have to memorize, that there's no da 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 da. And you just have to memorize it because it's something you say, it's auspicious in the debate courtyard. And I could do that then. Now I'm making excuses that it doesn't have a tune. So, we just have to know that life is fleeting and our capacities are fleeting. Our sense powers are losing their powers. They don't have the same kind of chutzpah they did, and our body doesn't have the same kind of ability to just jump up and sit down the way that it did as we get older. So I encourage those of you who are young, I'm on places where there's a lot of young people, please, even if it's just in a contrived way, check this material out and start to apply it to your life. And I think that you'll find that it makes an incredible difference if you allow it to. And if you have just a little bit of patience, turn the assault on your senses down off for a moment, and just try to maybe read a paragraph and then think about what that means. And then, you can go back to what you were doing. And then say, tomorrow I'll read another paragraph, or maybe tomorrow, and then build it up a little more and a little more, because you've been willing to read paragraphs about things you most certainly, I said in high school, I know we'll never use this. I was right. Maybe I learned how to do some things and learned how to learn. Okay. I know there's educators that you were learning how to learn. I get that. But this information, I can promise you, is information that will be applicable until the time you die, and will be most applicable while you're dying. And the problem with it is that you kind of have to make it so it's part of your mind for it to work when you're dying. because dying is scary. If you've ever seen someone die, it's scary. And when I've seen someone die, if that was me dying, I don't know how together I would be, how ready to, like I'm talking right now about all this stuff, like I know it like the back of my hand. I just wonder if you just turned a little bit of fever on and like intense suffering on, how readily available this information is. And, the waters are being tested right now, I have to say. And, I was talking with one of Rinpoche's students, Scott, and saying that, the beauty of we're going through something personally now. Lori has to go in for a major brain surgery, and it's one of the most difficult things that I've had to face in terms of personal situation in my life. And I was talking with one of Rinpoche's students, Scott, and was saying that it's, here's the time where my faith just increases because the Dharma works. And I can't imagine, how I would be relating to this information that we suddenly have in our lives about having to have a brain surgery that's very complicated without knowing a bigger kind of picture to the whole thing, without, understanding that Rinpoche was here and connected to all of us, and how this is a long run that we're all working on. It's not a short run. And when we think it's just a short run, everything just becomes scary because it's only in this box and that's all that there is. And when we can open it up a little bit more and kind of expand our minds and see that this consciousness never ends, this consciousness has always been there, and this consciousness won't end. And that, the things that I'm doing now and in the ways that I'm connecting now and with beings will be what makes me know you again, and what makes me be able to, love you again in 100 years when none of us will be here, but will we in some way be able to continue to be connected? Well, that depends on our spiritual development. And that's the thing. If you really, really, love the people in your life, develop spiritually, because that's the only way you'll be able to remember this situation we're in right now, and be able to, the person you love so much in this life right now. But when you die, it's going to be a new situation. And the only way you'll remember this kind of love, this love, and be able to connect with this person again, is to be spiritually advanced, so that you can remember previous lives, and then remember all of the beings that you, as you advance, want to advance right along with you. Because you remember periods like this. If since beginningless time, we've had all of these relationships, we want to remember all of these nurturing, caring relationships, people who are willing to take care of us when we were vulnerable. And all sentient beings have done this. Pabunka Rinpoche says if we really understood bodhicitta, that has the foundation of renunciation that we're talking about now, we would come upon all beings and have that kind of tender feeling that, oh, you've taken care of me when was so vulnerable. And I can relate to beings in this life like that, specifically one right now who's in jeopardy. And I can't imagine, if I could somehow open my mind enough to relate to the slug in the garden in this same way of wanting to protect them. And that slug in the garden protected me in a previous life in the same way I feel protected in my own home right now. So this is the expansive mind that we have to kind of come to terms with. But if we don't understand that we're just being forced again and again into aggregates among the five, some realms four, but among the five aggregates, and we're just being forced again and again and again, and that it's such a short period of time, it starts to make us more realistic about what we're doing, the seeds we're planting, and how we're relating to those around us. Because, I was speaking with, one of Geshe Dorje Damdu's students this morning who had some commitments and wasn't able to get to a teaching. And I said, well, those, if you got to care for the ones who you say you care about, if you say you're going to care about the ones you don't know. So it's a long story, but it was, family commitments and so forth. So This is something that we all just have to take to mind, not telling someone. I have to take this into my mind and remember this, and put these teachings into engaged action. So today we're talking about the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity, and it's so important. And I wanted to read an excerpt from, it's called The Essence of Excellent Discourses. It's in this lovely newer book out, the stages of the path and the oral transmission, selected teachings of the Galupa school. It's big. It's packed full of commentaries on Lam Rim and then some Mahamudra commentaries and so forth, but it's amazing oral tradition. And this particular text was written by Gomchen Ngawandrapa, who was around during Tsongkhapa. And this is a meditation manual based on the Lam Rim. And Gomchen means the great meditator Ngawandrapa. And I find it to be really a beautiful text. And it's the reason I bought this book, actually, because it contained this text. And then I started looking at what else it contained and was like, wow, it contains a lot of texts. And yeah, I wanted to share with you this section because I found it to be really profound on why do we guide? Why are the teachings in the order they are? Why are they to be guided like this in this kind of order? What's the purpose of it? And I found this to be really, really amazing. It's not really long. And then there was a couple of other points that I found were quite profound. And the other thing that was interesting is that the quote that I was talking about last week about how do you know if you have renunciation, that you feel you're in a burning building and looking for the exit. If you have that kind of conviction, this is the kind of conviction that shows, this is the measurement that says, oh yeah, you definitely have this desire to emerge from cyclic existence. You've definitely realized the medium scope. And it's interesting, it says it's actually from this text where you find the analogy of the burning building that you're in and wanting to get out of it so badly. And that's kind of the to show you that yes, you've realized the teachings shared in common with beings of medium capacity, and that this is the real measure of it. So I found that interesting. It says, being repulsed by samsara and drawn to a state of peace with the same will to escape as those stuck in a burning house or prison is the measure of having generated the attitude shared with a person of medium capacity. Since without it, you only pay lip service to the wish to accomplish the path to liberation. And you cannot achieve great compassion either. It says it right here. This is the Gomchen, the great meditator who knew Lama Tsongkhapa. You can't achieve great compassion either. Do not content yourself with a mere understanding, but pursue it earnestly. So here it's talking about renunciation, the desire to definitely emerge from cyclic existence. So here, why do we need to be guided in this manner? So the awakening mind is the central beam. So this is called the actual reasons section of this Essence of Excellent Discourses. There's, it follows in the pattern of the Lam Rim. And I think Pabunka Rinpoche says that this is a commentary really on the medium stages of the path to enlightenment. I believe it's Pabunka Rinpoche who said that. This particular text, it's kind of a practice text, but which I find interesting. The medium stages of the path to enlightenment, I'm finding is incredible. I didn't realize it was such a more simplified practice text. Maybe not simplified, that's the wrong thing to say, but it's a practice text. I even see Lama Tsongkhapa saying to sing some stuff. It's really interesting. It's really, it feels less technical and more, practical application of the same exact technical material. But you read it for yourself and see if you feel the same way about it. Every text hits everybody differently. But it reads more to me like liberation in the palm of your hand. than it does like the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment. And those who've studied liberation in the Great Treatise know there's a difference in feeling between Pabunka Rinpoche's commentary on Lama Tsongkhapa and Lama Tsongkhapa's text. Pabunka Rinpoche's commentary gives you this feeling of, whoa, I better do something, and kind of how to do it for those of us who have less kind of scope or capacity that needed that, then couldn't just read the Lamrim Chemo and see it. And I feel the medium stages, which was written, I think, 15 years later after the Lamrim Chemo, is, maybe Tsongkhapa was, writing it more towards that type. It's a guess. I don't know. Making this up. This is what, my own discoveries by reading books. This isn't some, according to what I'm finding in my own personal investigation. And that's all we have. Whatever you found can't help me. This is what I'm finding. And excuse me. So the actual reasons. So it's talking about bodhicitta. So first, he actually quotes Tsongkhapa's abbreviated stages of the path. And the third Dalai Lama quoted the same text, the Lamrim Duden, to get at the one of the sections. But here, this is a different quote. So I'm just showing. The awakening mind is the central beam of the supreme vehicle. For completing the two accumulations, it's like a philosopher's stone, or like a foundation, or the bedrock. So the awakening mind is the central beam of the Mahayana. It's the bedrock of it. So this is a quote from Lama Tsongkhapa's abbreviated stages of the path. He doesn't call it like a philosopher's stone. I think he says it's the foundation of the great vehicle in other translations. But here, it's interesting. It's this philosopher's stone. And I tried to find out if, that meant bedrock, foundation, but I didn't. It must. Okay, all temporary and ultimate objectives without exception are undoubtedly achieved by this supreme aspiration. So bodhicitta, we know it's the gold-making elixir. It turns every single virtuous activity that we do into a cause for full awakening. Everything that we do day and night when we have bodhicitta becomes a cause for Buddhahood. Even going to the bathroom becomes a cause for Buddhahood when we're a bodhisattva and have this mind of full awakening. Bodhicitta, this aspiring bodhicitta comes up, and then we have this ability to really perform at the highest spiritual kind of capacity once we generate this mind that aspires to enlightenment. And I feel so fortunate that we went over Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning of perfection so extensively to understand what bodhicitta is, the physical basis, the mental basis, and all of the causes and so forth. And I just, Rinpoche was so kind to give us that teaching. And when we get to the section on bodhicitta in the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment, I will go through it again. I almost started it again a month or two ago and just said, we're just going to do this again. I think it was when we were in the source. I was threatening to teach the entire Panchen Sonandrapa again when we were inspiring and engaged bodhicitta, but I just touched on a little of it. But when we get to it in the Lamrim Chemo, because Rinpoche always used it for that, we'll go back to it and find, what we maybe didn't hear the last time we heard it, or I didn't hear the last time I said it. It's interesting. When I say it, I hear it. And then it says, oh, it's this kind of very weird phenomena. So to realize the state of mind that carries such advantages, you need to take profound delight in its benefits. Since it's achieved by reflecting on the paths shared with persons of lesser and intermediate capacity, be sure you contemplate them and your achievement will be assured. So you're not assured any achievement. If you don't contemplate the teaching shared in common with beings of small and medium capacity, your achievement's not assured. And what is this achievement? To achieve complete Buddhahood. So it says to realize the state of mind that carries such advantages, you need to take profound delight in its benefits. And we see the benefits of the awakening mind in Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. We find this, the very first thing that Shantideva lays out are the benefits of this incredible mind. And you will not achieve this incredible mind if you don't, have a pure understanding of the teaching shared in common with beings of small and medium capacity. And if you don't have that and don't get that mind, you can't become a Buddha. So these are the stakes. If you want to have complete freedom from suffering and have the ultimate amount of happiness possible, you have to have meditated on the pathways shared in common with beings of small and medium capacity. So it says, well, bodhicitta, its prime causes are love and compassion. If when you reflect on the way you are personally deprived of happiness and tormented by suffering, you are not horrified, how can you possibly find the suffering of others unbearable? So if you're not horrified by your own situation, and what is the situation? The whole situation, not this life, the whole situation. So if you're not horrified by the whole situation, by the fact that I could get up and die and be in a hell realm, let's say that's real. Just say that, bear with me for a moment. It says it in the Buddha said it. Buddha said it a lot. Say there's this place that I could be born in my mind with unbearable amounts of suffering any moment. I mean, it could happen. And all it would take is for me to be like, get up, someone yells at me, I'm really angry, have a heart attack and die. And all this, all this thinking I'm going to be able to project something really good. I just got really, really angry. And we know that that is the worst. And now suddenly I have a heart attack in the midst of just red-faced anger. I mean, this is a horrible possibility. And it could happen. This isn't like out of the realm of possibility altogether. So when we think about this in terms of ourselves, and then we see someone else really angry, and we think, are you about to have a heart attack? Then it makes us be able to have compassion. You see what I mean? If we don't understand what's going on with us, we don't understand that our actions are so destructive and that these actions give rise to experiences. And we don't understand this cycle of ignorance and then action and then consciousness. If we don't understand this cycle for ourselves, how will we possibly be able to generate a mind that cares what's going on with someone else or sees what's going on with them as unbearable as they drove by in a Lamborghini? Seeing the person, in a private, getting on a private jet and seeing that situation as unbearable. And if you don't, it means you haven't studied the First Noble Truth. You haven't studied the suffering of change. Okay. Thus, you should reflect on how you are subjected to the unfortunate realm's miseries and deprived of happiness, even in fortunate births, relating it to yourself personally. So you see how much the instruction tradition is telling you, you've got to take your own, as Geshe Dorje Damdu says, take your own personal experiences, make this your own, make this real. Don't make this a fantasy world. Don't make this a fairy tale. Make this your life, and you're applying these principles to your life and discovering the First Noble Truth based on your experiences in your life. So that then you, once you discover the First Noble Truth, can then help others discover the First Noble Truth. You see, they have to discover it too. So how could you help them if you haven't discovered it? They have to discover it. They don't get it, clearly. You got it a tiny bit. If you could get it a tiny bit more and a tiny bit more and a little bit more, you could be good enough to be able to explain it to them. But now you just get mad at them when you see them angry at you. Really, really, when we start to make Lamrim our mind and work with it and and then fail and then say, oh my gosh, why am I failing? Oh, because these things are coming up. It's like we're going to war with a real enemy. And that's the self-grasping ignorance, self-cherishing attitude. Banish the one to blame for everything. There's no one else to blame except this self-cherishing attitude that engaged in something before that made someone come at me and yell, that made a karma in my mind to experiencing something except bliss. I'd only be experiencing some sort of bliss. Even if you were yelling, if I had gotten rid of my self-grasping ignorance, it's not going to stop your yelling. I don't become a Buddha and everyone's a Buddha. but I can experience bliss while you're yelling at me. The mind of bliss and emptiness, clear light of bliss and emptiness. It's not that everything becomes bliss, because there's still people projecting samsara, and the Buddha is coming to help. The Buddha wouldn't say all contaminated things aren't suffering. It's the second seal. There's a lot here we have to unpack, and I encourage you, please unpack this. Look at more and more Lamrim commentaries. When you're working on a section, find as many books on it as possible. Kaju Nyingma Sakya Galu, just find the books on the section you're looking at and just dive in, dive in, dive in. You're going to find stuff that'll change your mind. I promise. I promise that. Thus, you should reflect on how you are subjected to the unfortunate realms of miseries and deprived of happiness, even in fortunate rebirths, relating it to yourself personally. According to the teaching for persons of lesser and intermediate capacity, and love and compassion will emerge for sentient beings, your friends. So it says it'll emerge from doing this, from meditating on your own plight in terms of small and medium capacity. Then you'll be able to have this emerge for sentient beings, for friends. Furthermore, as the accumulation and purifications of persons of lesser and intermediate capacity are the means to prepare your mind for bodhicitta, contemplate how the topics of persons of small and medium capacity are prerequisites to the path of a person of great capacity, and treasure their practice. Having trained in this way, stabilize the bodhicitta by performing aspirational bodhicitta ceremony and studying the precepts. Geshe Dorje Damdu is so kind. Every time he has class, he gives the aspirational bodhisattva vows right out of these practice manuals, right out of the practice manual. What we do, our teachers are so kind not to deviate from that. And when I look back on some of the stuff Rinpoche used to do, and now I'm learning about it, it's just like blows my mind that their minds have become so imbued with these teachings that they personify it. Then when you feel you can bear the load of a bodhisattva practice, take the vow of engaged bodhicitta and guard yourself against root transgressions, even at the cost of your life. So once you really feel like you want to work for the sake of all sentient beings, take an actual bodhisattva vow, engaged bodhisattva vow. And we learned about that, and you take that every time you take a tantric initiation, and you can't enter the mandala unless you have a bodhisattva vow and a tantric initiation. You can't. It's one of the prerequisites from the side of the student to getting initiation is taking the bodhisattva vow. Refrain from the lesser and intermediate transgressions and restore your vow if it declines. Train in the 6 perfections in general and in tranquil abiding in particular to attain clairvoyance and special insight. Once you have a decisive understanding of suchness, engage in Tantra. Furthermore, having understood the profound and vast paths along with their order, definite number, and association, cease contenting yourself with an incomplete path for achieving Buddhahood. Wow. It's like once you've studied enough, you're going to stop not studying enough. It's really, really interesting how what I was saying before, too bad you didn't have the fervor, the knowing you needed to study all this stuff, 25 years ago, dummy. Yeah, I studied, not so shabby, obviously. But if I can't imagine if I studied like I do these days in my, for 25 years, I'd like be really super capable. So we're talking about now the 3 types of suffering. I just wanted to share that with you. And I'm going to continue to share things as I find them that I find appealing for practice. And I found a bunch more stuff, but we can't get to it all at once. I mean, I guess we can't, they say. So we do our best. But yeah, this book's really great. I've wanted it for a while. And for Christmas, Lori bought me bunch of books. I've been saying, I want this book. And now the trick is, as someone else said, is to read them. And I've also vowed not to buy books that I don't read anymore, or that I won't read all of. Even if I get through half of it and say, oh man, I know, I just got to I'm going to read it because I bought it. And then I don't know what I need. So maybe, there's something in there, that I need. I like Geshe Dorje Damdula, maybe it was a librarian in the past and liked to collect books. he used to, say this in classes. And then unfortunately, his books that he collected got eaten, I think, by termites, the story goes. And he said, even this Duje Tamche Mitapa, all composite things are impermanent, even my books. I think that's the story. But if it's not exactly the story, forgive me. We'll do Vajrasattva mantra. Okay, so we're looking at the 3 types of suffering. We went over the 8 types of suffering and the 6 types of suffering. I won't, I will. The suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death, the suffering of meeting with the unpleasant, separating from the pleasant, not getting what you want, and the suffering of the appropriated aggregates, the suffering of uncertainty, the suffering of insatiability, the suffering of rebirth, the suffering of casting off bodies, the suffering of descending from the high to the low, and the suffering of having no companions. That's the one. And then now we get to a way that we can put all of this into one package called the 3 types of suffering, or just really how, when the Buddha is really, really talking about suffering, the main thing the Buddha is talking about is the 3rd suffering, the suffering of conditionality, pervasive compounded suffering. These appropriated aggregates, the kind of the aspiration to have them, and the attachment to the ones we have, and this perpetual kind of grasping that causes us to be forced again and again into cyclic existence. But let's look at this one by one. And this is not a big section, so we'll get through this section today, I think. Okay, so the first type of suffering, it's interesting. Lama Tsongkhapa starts with the suffering of change, which is much more complex to understand than the suffering of pain. It's interesting just to see it in this order. But we'll do it in the order that Tsongkhapa is doing it. So the suffering of change. So these are pleasant feelings, happy feelings, full stop, in cyclic existence. Wow, like everything is suffering, no matter what, because all composite things are impermanent, all contaminated things are in the nature of suffering. If we're experiencing it within cyclic existence, it's necessary result of contamination. Grasping at an I and phenomena as being truly established is where this starts. The affliction is the root affliction, is this self-grasping ignorance. So we are forced into this situation again and again, and no matter what we experience within it, even if it seems good, it will change. And us going towards it and getting it is just this bait that keeps us thinking that there's some sort of satisfactory result we can come up with within cyclic existence. So it keeps us bound in samsara, this idea that the things around us will truly bring us ultimate happiness that won't end in some sort of form of suffering. And it's this misconception that keeps us bound in this prison that we eventually, leave, if we're looking at in terms of this body, and then are thrust into another prison-like experience called samsara. So pleasant feelings experienced by beings in cyclic existence are like the pleasure felt when cool water is applied to an inflamed boil or a carbuncle. As the temporary feeling fades, the pain reasserts itself. This is called the suffering of change, and includes not only the feeling itself, but also the main mind and other mental processes similar to it, as well as the contaminated objects which, when perceived, give rise to suffering. So everything, the container, its inhabitants, samsara, the things in it, the container, all of it is suffering because it's brought about by a cause that's contaminated. And the Buddha's world is not brought about, the Buddha's experience is not brought about by contaminated. And an arhat, here a solitary realized arhat experience is not brought about from a contaminated place. So this is the differentiation between the states of ease that an arhat has, either here a solitary realizer or a Mahayana arhat, a Buddha, and ours. So it's, Rinpoche used to give the explanations that we find in a lot of the texts, such as when you're tired from walking a long distance, then you go and say, oh, I sit down, and that brings you happiness. But if sitting down caused you happiness, and that was a permanent unitary kind of thing that caused happiness, then you wouldn't need to ever get up and feel like, oh, I really need to get up. So you sit down for too long, and that sitting down then becomes a source of suffering that you believed while you were going into that experience was all you needed to be happy. I just got to get off my feet. And then when you get off your feet, now you just want to get on your feet. So Rinpoche always gave these kinds of explanations. Oh, I really want to go for a walk, but you walk too far and now your legs hurt. Oh, I'm really hot. I need to cool off. So you go in, this is Rinpoche's, you go into an air-conditioned room and you feel this like cooling feeling and you think, oh, this is happiness. And then all of a sudden it's too cold and you wish you could warm up. So if that cooling off feeling had inherently within it some kind of form of happiness, then you would just stay there and you'd just be happy. Oh, I'm finally gotten to the cool place, and that's where it's always happy. I finally warmed up. When you're cold and you get to a warm place, go sit, be outside and freezing and sit in a sauna. I remember being in places where a couple times where there was snow outside, and then you can go sit in a sauna. Then you go do that. And then you're like, oh, this is great. And then you're like, it's so hot. It gets so hot that you actually start bringing snow in and putting it on you to cool off. It's just this funny thing that we do. And we think that we're having fun the whole time, for sure. But it's all just loaded with a self-destruct mechanism within it that's going to eventually cause us suffering. Why? Because we don't get to have permanent happiness. We don't get to have permanent ease. We don't get to have freedom from suffering and cyclic existence because we have this self-cherishing attitude, because we have this self-grasping ignorance, and we've had it since beginningless time. And this is going to just give rise to this experience over and over and over again until we get it right. And if you think very carefully about all the situations within cyclic existence that you could have, whether you can't take your money with you when you pass away, you can't take your things with you when you pass away, someone you love passes away, you won't see them, the next day. We think about all of these things that we could try to pinpoint as true happiness in cyclic existence, and we won't be able to find it. And if that's the case, then that means it's suffering. Because if it's something that is going to be a gauge from which I decide other things are bad or good, then that's going to be almost like the cause for me to feel bad about other less heightened forms of happiness. So I can say that party wasn't as good as the other party. So all parties are now measured against the greatest party that I had. So now that greatest party that I had couldn't stay and be a party all the time. And when I had to go home, I was tired and the party was over. But now I remember it in my memory as this thing. And now I'm weighing other things against it. So not only did it change, but it's been a way that I can relate to other things to convince myself that they aren't good enough either. And all the while I'm grasping at all of these things as having some potential to actually give rise to happiness. And the Buddha said, this is the problem. The suffering of pain, this is easy. Suffering of change, this one's easy. The normal thing you think of as suffering, not an ice cream cone. But as Geshe Dorje Damdula says, you love your ice cream cone, when does it become repulsive and make you want to vomit? You get the ice cream cone, what if it had 25 scoops on it all the way to the top of your favorite ice cream? You eat the first scoop, it's still going pretty well, still delicious and tasty. You get to the second or third scoop and it's something that's repulsive. Whereas getting to the ice cream, you felt like it was inherently something that would make you so happy, that had within it the essence of, good. This is good. Ice cream is good. As Betsy, I think Elizabeth Napper said, I feel like chocolate objectively exists as good. This feeling. So if it did, it would only bring happiness. You'd be able to just shove ice cream in your mouth all day. And it would just be like, yes, like the first bite all day. But we know that's not the case. So this is something we look at when we think about contaminated happiness. We think about objects. We think about even the states of mind of happiness within cyclic existence dissipate, and our relationship to things that we think make us happy dissipates. When a painfully inflamed boil makes contact with an irritant such as salt water, it's agonizing. So before they're talking about you've got this boil that you cool off, you have some sort of maybe easier, like you have a burn and you put Neosporin on it and it feels better, but it's not gonna keep feeling better, or because it's the nature of it is the way it is, or you have this burn that you then pour salt water on or alcohol on. This is the kind of difference. One feels like it's been some sort of pleasurable thing happening, where really its nature is just suffering, and the other is just an outright pain, like a headache, a broken arm, the things that we experience in cyclic existence that are very coarse and obvious. This is how you recognize the feeling of pain. Painful feelings like this constitute the suffering of pain, because as soon as they arise, the body and mind are tormented, as in the case of kidney pain. Also, as explained above, the suffering of pain is not just feeling. So it's not just an actual feeling. So now we're going to get to the suffering of conditionality. This is the one that Rinpoche talked about, tons and tons and tons being forced into a set of contaminated aggregates beyond your control by karma and contaminated karmas and afflictions and their active seeds, being forced again and again and again, because of being attached to your aggregates, because of aspiring to have aggregates. And why? Because of self-grasping ignorance. Right at the kind of driver at the wheel is self-grasping ignorance. I and mine, I am Jeff. These are mine, not mine as in like, that's my car. The car is mine. Mine as in the consciousness, it says mine. This body is mine. This mind is mine. This grasping at I as being inherently existent perpetuates this cycle. I need a body. I want another body. And then I get aggregates because of this habituation. So and the habituation is all composite things are impermanent, all contaminated things are in the nature of suffering. So this habituation is caused by contamination. So the experience is contamination over and over and over again, being forced into among the 5 aggregates, because we know that the formless realm, there aren't 5 aggregates, there's 4 aggregates. So we say among the 5 aggregates, but wherever we are in cyclic existence, we will have this pervasive compounded suffering. We can, say the desire realm has all 3 sufferings, and that some of the form realm has a couple of the sufferings, and the formless realm only has this pervasive compounded suffering. But if you have pervasive compounded suffering, it means you're necessarily within cyclic existence, and you are necessarily in a state of suffering perpetually, always, no matter where you are. And in this same text, in the 5th Dalai Lama's spoken words of Manjushri, there's an incredible example given that if your samsara is like being frozen in a block of ice since beginningless time. So you're frozen in a block of ice. You'll never, ever know warmth until it all melts. So since beginningless time, you've only been frozen in a block of ice. So you have never experienced happiness. You've never experienced warmth. The only way you will experience happiness is if you are free from cyclic existence, because cyclic existence is being like frozen in a block of ice and always being frozen in a block of ice. And you're frozen in a block of ice, you won't feel the outside warmth until it's all melted off of you and you can feel the outside warmth. You will never experience happiness until you get rid of the self-grasping ignorance, because with the self-grasping ignorance present, you always are in a block of ice, always just have suffering, period, full stop. And once you come to know this and come to understand this is the nature of cyclic existence, you will want to definitely emerge. Once you believe this beyond the shadow of a doubt, and you become convinced that, you've never experienced happiness, you've only experienced suffering that's looked like happiness, and you've just never known what happiness is. So you think that, maybe like being able to just move a little bit is enough. But that's not warmth. The warmth would be able to be if you could experience in it in its complete way. It's something very profound in understanding this, and understanding that when you come to terms with the 8 sufferings, 6 sufferings, and 3 sufferings, and see that, no matter what, the billionaire on their private island that somehow seems so calm is going to have to be looking, up at those around them that will be inheriting their private island, some of which, they won't necessarily, like as much as others. And they'll be looking around at all of them and wondering, where did the private island go? And where will they go next? And that attachment, that craving for more, that dissatisfaction will just lead to more states, and maybe like a hungry ghost, if you could believe such a thing, or like a being. Some kinds of animals are more kind of food driven than others, that just, imagine the person that you think has it all, and you just can't believe it. And then think about them in 50 years, because of this craving for more, and because of having all of this stuff, they're suddenly some sort of animal just driven by food and eating, like poop in the yard, like our dogs, because they were maybe generous, philanthropy, but didn't have ethics. That's what the dog rebirth, Rinpoche always said. A dog that's in a house and has nice things, it's because they didn't have ethics, but they were generous in a past life. And to be generous, you had to have money. So just think about it. Kala might have been a king, and that's why she's a dog. So strange when you think of this, an unethical king who was generous. So you see, someone who you feel like, oh, they have it all, but no one has it all in samsara. Everyone only has suffering. That's where we start to be able to make that ground of equanimity. The ground of there's like a pre-equanimity ground. I was thinking today, Geshe Dorje Damdu was teaching equanimity and the 7-point cause and effect for realizing bodhicitta that we've gone over a gajillion times. So I love hearing about it from somebody, but not my mouth or Rinpoche's mouth, because it's cool, because we've gone over it so much. I was thinking the pre-step for this equanimity, where is really understanding this suffering completely, in a full, expansive way. And I think that this is, something that, based on, the points Gomchen Ngawan Drapa makes, and then the 5th Dalai Lama makes, and we'll get into spoken words of Manjushri more. I think you'll find that this meditation on the First Noble Truth, the identification of suffering, and then the identification and the knowing what you need to abandon in terms of origin, and the reality that we can end all of this, makes you say, well, if this kind of state of dissatisfaction can end, why am I being dissatisfied? How do I end it? Path. So this is how we apply this to our lives and make it meaningful. So thank you so much for listening to this part today. We'll get into the suffering of change. I'll read it. It's kind of extensive in the Lamrim Chemo, the section. It's not that extensive, but I don't have time to do it today. So we'll table it until next time. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there's grasping, you do not have the view. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. Prayer for the flourishing of Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings. Thank you so much again for listening. Really appreciate it. It really inspires me to look more and more into these texts, because you being Rinpoche's students, I owe it to you to be able to present as much as I possibly can, even if it's over my head. As long as I'm just repeating it, I feel that it's my duty to you to be able to present this in this fashion. So thank you for being patient. Right, Kala? Prayer for the flourishing of Tsongkhapa's teaching. Though he's the father, producer of all conqueror, as a conqueror's son, he produced the thought of upholding the conqueror's dharma in infinite worlds. Through this truth, may the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. When in the presence of Buddha Indrakheto, He made his vow. The conqueror and his offspring praised his powerful courage. Through this truth, may the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. That the lineage of pure view and conduct might spread, he offered a white crystal rosary to the sage, who gave him a conch and prophesied, through this truth, may the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. His pure view, free of eternity or destruction, his pure meditation, cleansed of dark fading and fog, his pure conduct, practiced according to the conqueror's orders, may the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. Learned since he extensively sought out learning, reverently, rightly applying it to himself, good, dedicating all for the beings in the doctrine, may the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish through being sure that all scriptures and definitive and interpretive were without contradiction, advice for one person's practice. He stopped all misconduct. May the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. This is so important that all the teachings the Buddha ever gave were advice for one person's practice. We have to know what that means. We all have these different affinities. We all have these different varieties. And this is why all these commentaries are so important for us to be able to kind of hit the target of our own needs. Wow. Understanding that all teachings are free of contradiction is what that means. They're all for a person to evolve spiritually. Listening to explanations of the three Pitakas, realized teachings, practice of the three highest higher trainings, his skilled and accomplished life story is amazing. May the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. Outwardly calmed and subdued by the hearer's conduct, inwardly trusting in the two stages practice, he allied without clash the two good paths of Sutra and Tantra. May the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. Combining voidness explained as the causal vehicle with great bliss achieved by method, the effect vehicle, hard essence of 80,000 Dharma bundles. May the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. By the power of the ocean of oath-bound doctrine protectors like the main guardians, the three beings paths, the quick-acting Lord Vaishravana, Karmayana, may the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. In short, by the lasting of glorious gurus' lives, by the earth being full of good, learned, reverend holders of the teaching, and by the increase of the power of its patrons, may the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. A concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. Why is my book so funny today? There it is. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. Imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and particularly the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Any mistakes I've made, may they be purified by the mantra of Vajrasattva, imagining Khyentse Geshe Wandak inseparable from Vajrasattva in the space in front of you, showering down light rays and nectars on you and all sentient beings, purifying your body, speech, and mind. And those light rays and nectars are transforming into white ohms, purifying your body, red ahs, purifying your speech, and blue ohms, purifying yours and all sentient beings' minds. Om benzo sato samaya manevalaya benzo zara zena vajida dedameva zulagaimeva zubagaimeva hanaradimeva vasavazidi medvaja zavakamazuji megidam triangurahom ha bhagavan zavadagata benzo mamamoka benzo bhava mahazamaya sapa om. May we always be protected by Paul and Lamo. Jai Rama, 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 Jai Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Jo Rama Dun Jo Galara Mo Rama Wajada Jadun Jo Rilla Rilla Hun Jo Hun. Many obstacles you're having be removed through the power of the three wrathful protectors, Drapu Sundri. Om Vajrapani Hayagriva Garuda Om Ve. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traversed 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. Prayer of supplication for Namyo Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our protector. A complex yogi poses as a simple monk. Homage to Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Om, 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 Om. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like a teacher who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds of profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of three capacities. Now that sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all your teachers passed away and understood the sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all of our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. Thank you so much, everyone. Try to use these analogies when you start to become really angry or really grasping at something and attached. Think about the idea that we're in this ice block and we've been frozen since beginningless time. And when we think that things that are really going to harm us are going to make us happy, we don't know what happiness is. So we have to say to ourselves, wow, I really want this, but I don't know what happiness is, and I never have. But the only way that I'll know what happiness is if I get rid of the self-grasping ignorance and the self-cherishing attitude that comes from it. Thank you.